So a lot of people ask me too, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? Alzheimer's is a type of dementia, and dementia is kind of an umbrella term, but there are over 50 different types of dementia. Alzheimer's does happen to be the most common. About 40 to 50% of the dementias that are diagnosed are of Alzheimer's, but certainly not the only one that we see.
Mm-hmm. What are some other types of dementia that you see out there?
The probably one of the most common ones that I see is vascular dementia. So how many times have you said to yourself, you know what, this medicine's not doing me any good. I'm not going to take my blood pressure medicine, and I don't need to take my diabetic medicine, and you know what, it's just a bunch of hooey. My numbers aren't better anyway. Well, what happens when you don't follow your treatment plan, though, is that you develop a vascular dementia. So one thing that I'd like the friends that are listening to know, that if it's good for your heart, it's good for your brain. So you have to take care of your heart, but you also have to take care of your brain. The other most common dementia that we see is called Lewy body. As recently as 5, 6, 7 years ago, I had talked to physicians and they'd never heard the word Lewy body. So what's the difference between Alzheimer's and Lewy body? It all starts in one cell in your brain. So you and I have billions of neurons in our brains. And what happens is one dies, and then another one dies, and then another one dies. And depending on the symptoms that you present, that's how another way, though, that they do help diagnose dementia. So with Lewy body, usually it's men. Alzheimer's usually females. With Lewy body, more falls, happens earlier in the disease, but it also very vivid hallucinations. And not so much hallucinations with the pink elephant on the wall where you're frightened, but the type of hallucinations, and it's very real to the person. But somebody was here and they went through my closet. Somebody was here and my purse is gone.
Wow.
And it's very real to them. Alzheimer's, that happens too, but it happens later on in the disease process.
Wow.
So, Trish, what can a family do when they're suspecting the symptoms of memory loss? Like, what's the first thing they should do?
You need to really get a good diagnosis. And I think families get a little complacent because they'll say, well, she's 87 years old. You don't expect her to remember her birthday. You don't expect her to remember how many kids she's got. You don't expect her to know the names of her grandchildren. Yes, memory loss is not a normal part of aging. And families get kind of comfortable with, oh, well, that's just grandma. But lots of things cause memory loss. One of the things that the doctor's going to ask you about are medication changes. Another thing that will happen is an infection. Another thing, and I'm sure that there are people that are listening that, oh, you know what, she's right. When I fell and I broke my hip that time, they thought I lost my mind.
Wow.
And what had happened is that they had a drug-induced or a trauma-induced type of delirium. We call them the 3Ds, depression, dementia, and delirium. And they all kind of fall under one umbrella. But depression very much looks like early Alzheimer's. You don't have interest in things, you start to see some changes. You need one of two things to be diagnosed with dementia. It's either memory loss, but also a challenge with your intellect, and also changes in your personality.
Oh, wow.
So you might have that guy that, you know what, he can do the New York crossword puzzle in 10 minutes in pen and never make a mistake. And you know what, he can't do that anymore. Or you know what, you have mom that, you know, she always was dressed just so. You know, her earrings matched her little necklace and her shoes matched her little purse. And now she doesn't really care, and she doesn't pay that much attention to her appearance. So you'll see a personality change or an intellect change, so it's not just memory changes. So it's two of those three things to really have a diagnosis. But to get a thorough medical workup, you should know your labs, ask the doctor about your labs. The doctors, then they usually do a little test, and it's called the mini-mental. And the mini-mental, what it does is it just measures some cognitive ability. I can't count by sevens backwards from 100. I hope I never get that test.
Oh my gosh, nor do I.
Right. Or if I'm preoccupied.
I could do it from 21.
Yeah. But that's one of the questions they're on. And none of us like to be tested. And we all get a little anxious and we get a little overwhelmed and we get a little guarded. So how accurate really is just doing the mini-mental.
Sure.
So you need labs. You need the doctor to follow up on what changes are happening. So I think it's really, those are some of the important things. one of the new tests, and I think you've been hearing about it on the radio and television, is this the MOCA, the Montreal cognitive test. And I think that's the one that we're going to start seeing more often. And it's called the MOCA, and that's, you can look that up, but the initials are MOCHA. And I think that's the one that we're going to start seeing a little bit more commonly used versus, and there are several. There's the slums, and there's the another one that comes out of Boston, another one comes out of Hershey, Pennsylvania at the university there. But this is the one that I think they're going to lean towards.
I have to say thanks a latte for telling us about the mocha.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's so many different things to consider when mom or dad show signs of memory loss. What does a family have to consider, and how do they manage this? And is there outside help?
The very first things that families should be concerned about is safety. You know, can they manage alone? And I think that's the big thing, that right at home, your company and the people that you serve, same thing with the people that I serve in our Brookdale Senior Living. But what we see is that their safety awareness was poor. You know, they leave the stove on, they left the water running, now they flooded the kitchen. They didn't turn the lights on going down the basement stairs. I think one thing I'd like to mention here is that, and I talked to somebody yesterday and said, yeah, they have some memory loss and their judgment's kind of poor. And I said, are they still driving? Well, yeah. Families need to know that at some point it's your responsibility and not the person's responsibility anymore.
Such a good point.
And you have to get those car keys. And legally, in the state of Illinois anyway, legally, a physician can revoke a driver's license. I don't know if that's nationwide, but I do know that it's applicable here in the state. But you need to keep your loved ones safe, but you also need to keep society and the community safe. It's that guy that's going to plow into a busload of kids because he can't remember if it's the brake or the accelerator.
Trish, you are so right on that, and it is a family's responsibility. And unfortunately, we all go into some sort of denial when this happens. You know, I just have a recent story of my buddy's father, 91 years old, down in Florida. In fact, he was just down there checking on him. He left. His father decided to take a drive at night, and he T-boned this other car. And he doesn't even remember driving. So, and my buddy was very concerned about that. And so now the families had to get together and start looking at reality versus denial.
Absolutely, and I think, you know what driving represents? Driving represents our independence.
Yes.
You know, driving represents I have my marbles. I passed the driver's test, I went down there and
Sure.
they said, here, you know what, you're good for another year. And I think with families, it's very hard for a daughter to say to dad, I'm your boss, now give me your keys.
Absolutely.
Oh, it is.
Years ago I read a book and it was by Dr. Richard Harris, but it was called I'm Okay, You're Okay.
Oh, I remember that.
And in that book, though, it talks about that inside of us, we have an adult and a child and a parent. And no matter how old we get, there's a part of us that never wants to let go of that child.
Sure.
And so now we have to, though, because now we have to parent our parent. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges that families have, is that, you know what, my dad was always the ruler of the roost. I can't go and tell dad that he's got to change his socks because he hasn't for 2 weeks. I can't go there and tell dad that, you know what, you're not taking your medicine, I'm going to take you to the doctor. Families have a real hard time because we have that relationship with our parents and we're still their child.
Exactly. The friend I was just mentioning, when he was down there taking care of his dad, my buddy said, Dad, I don't think you should drive anymore. His dad was insulted. He says, son, I drove a tank in World War II.
Right.
And you know, you can imagine how insulting this would be. So, you know, though these things have to be approached, you can also approach these things in a very loving, caring way too.
But I think we need to approach them sooner.
Then,
And so before, you know, dementia or Alzheimer's kicks in, I think that we should have those conversations as a family, and as parents, we're raising our children to have our best interest at heart, just as we have their best interest at heart. And so to have the conversation early so that you know and are comfortable knowing that that child's going to do the right thing for you.
Well, that family is now in they're talking to each other about now putting dad into some sort of community.
Well, let's
When
talk
would
about
be-
that.
yeah.
Yeah. You know what? None of us want to leave our home. You know, our home that's our nest, that's where our memories are, that's where our comfort is, that's where we can really be ourselves and not be invaded by anything. So I know that my husband and I, we talk often, you know, what will happen when it comes time for us to retire. And I think what, you know, families really need to understand is that maybe not initially does your loved one need 24-hour supervision. Maybe it's just a couple times a week for somebody to come in and visit. Maybe somebody to come on in and do a little housekeeping, but then starts to notice things. I remember doing an assessment on a really lovely lady in Maywood. And I walked into the house and there was somewhat of a funny odor, but she was very pleasant, very delightful. She had a beautiful doll collection. We had such a lovely visit. And the telephone rang and she said, "Oh, I'll be right back." So she goes into the other room and I start to, as I'm standing there waiting for her, I hear her call me and I go into her bedroom and she has spoiled pork chops underneath her pillow.
Oh.
And because she didn't want anyone to steal them. And so if I hide my food, no one will see it. I was also just reading, when we're looking up this flu right now, we're having a terrible, terrible flu season.
Oh, yes.
And I happened to come across an article, though, about what happens when you eat spoiled food. So, drinking spoiled milk, eating spoiled cheese, eggs that have been sitting there for 6 months. Families need to look. They need to know. And those are some of the things that we can manage at home with services like Right at Home offers. Services that maybe the family wants to be able to provide. You know, mom took care of me, I'm going to take care of her. But how well can you really do that? Because I think most of all, what the people that we serve want is to never ever be a burden. You know, nobody wants to be a burden.
Sure.
And I think that how can you give them as much independence and freedom in those decisions as you can?
I know that's one of my biggest fears for my family is that I do not become a burden on them.
Right.
And we all go through these feelings, so don't be in denial about it, talk about it.
And so, Trish, when there's a sudden change in a parent's behavior, what do we do?
Well, I'll tell you what nurses do. If you notice that something's really significant and that the conversation is increased paranoia and increased suspiciousness, increased agitation, the very first thing we do is check for a urinary tract infection. And they don't really know the connection with the chemistry. But I can, numerous times, 99% of the time, when you see a sudden change in mentation or a sudden change in their orientation or their behavior, always suspect a urinary infection. The elderly do not like to drink water. Because then I gotta get up and I gotta go to the bathroom. And then the doctor gave me the water pill. And if I do that, then I'm not gonna sit here and be able to watch Jeopardy for the whole 30 minutes at a time. Or I'm not gonna be able to watch Wheel of Fortune to see what Vanna's wearing tonight. So they don't wanna drink. But then you get dehydrated.
Right.
And then what happens when you get dehydrated? That, you know, it's dark and it's warm inside your bladder and that's where the bug and the bacteria is gonna grow. And then bada bing, bada boom.
Oh,
It's an
gosh,
infection.
I can see that happening. In fact, I know we've all experienced this in our businesses at Right at Home. I'm sure you always experience this with your families at Brookdale.
Right.
UTI is huge.
It is huge, and it's not underdiagnosed once you get them to urgent care or once you call the physician, but it's the families trying to spot that. Oh, mom's just having a bad day. Oh, dad's pretty grouchy today. Geez, I wonder why, you know, he's so unkempt and he didn't get dressed, and boy, he didn't even have anything to eat this morning because he doesn't know what time it is. These are the kind of things when they happen suddenly, but usually it's very gradual. It's very subtle. Families now will tell me as they bring their loved ones into memory care at Brookdale, is that, you know what, yeah, 10, 15 years ago we saw it, we just didn't see it, but we saw it.
Right.
So what does a family do when mom or dad start asking, who are you? Or when can we go home? Things like that, when they're already home.
This is more true with someone with a true Alzheimer's, and again, there are many different types of dementia. But what they call retrogenesis, and that means back to the beginning. So the average age, functional age of someone can be determined by doing, again, some easy testing. But what happens is you go back in time. So you retro back to the beginning. And so as you go through these, and the guy's, his name was Dr. Barry Wiesberg, and he's done some fascinating research in this. So when they say to you, you know, where's my mother? Have you talked to my mother? Probably one of the most cruel things you can say is, Mom, you're 84 years old. Do you think your mother's still alive?
Wow.
And families will do that because they think she can't be asking for her mother. Her mother's been dead for 4 years. But to that person, she's back when she was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old.
Sure.
And I think what Jeanette was, you know, one of the things that you were asking is, what do families say then? You know, I want to go on home, or where's my mother, or I have to get to work today, or I have to go pick up the kids from school.
Right.
When all that happened many years ago. It's very, very difficult, but what you really need to do is you need to step into their world. You know what? Well, tell me about Mom.
Right.
You know, what color was her hair? Did she wear perfume? What was the favorite food that she used to cook for you? What kind of things did you do with Dad when you and he went out to the garage? Could he really just fix anything? And you really have to try to tap into those memories. And what you'll see is it decreases their anxiety, it decreases their agitation. They know that you're connected and that you're listening. But to say, Mom, you know what, that's not true. Grandma's been dead for years. Or, you know what, Mom, you haven't worked. You've been retired for 32 years. When a lot of times that was their whole identity.
Right.
Whatever kind of job they did, you know, that was their identity. And I think with home care companies as well as with Brookdale, the better we know the person, the more successful we are. And sometimes that's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
A family should be sitting down talking about the history.
Exactly.
With not only us, but Brookdale, anybody, even within the family.
And I think there are things that, you know, we don't like to talk about as society. I remember taking care of a really special lady, but she didn't want to come out of her room. And how do we get her to come to the dining room, and how do we get her to socialize a little bit? Finally, a daughter arrived from Nevada. The daughter did not live in Illinois, and she said, my mother had been a victim of rape internally by the brothers. The brothers would repeatedly rape her. It took her a long time to even get out of the house, but now that she has the dementia, anything frightens her. So any males would frighten her, so there were other male residents there was male staff there, and this was very intimidating and frightening to her. But the family doesn't want to tell you that. You know, that's a dirty, ugly little secret.
Right.
And the family doesn't want you to know that.
Yeah, one of those skeletons in the closet.
Yeah, and we all have skeletons. There's now one person that our paths cross
Amen.
that has not had some kind of secret that we have to keep.
Right.
Earlier, too, I think we were talking about why is it so hard, I think, for families to accept that their person, their loved one, has dementia or Alzheimer's. Because I think it manifests itself in behavior. You know, my father would never behave that way.
Right.
My mother would never say a dirty word. She
Right,
was
but now those
always prim and
filters are
proper.
gone, and yeah.
And now they behave that way, and families say, they become very critical, they become very judgmental. But you know, do we get mad if they have diabetes? Do we get mad if they have rheumatoid arthritis? Do we get mad if they have congestive heart failure? And I think because it's a behavior, and we judge each other based on behavior. And I don't want anyone to judge my mother that way. I don't want anyone to judge my father that way. And I think we have to, those are some of the barriers that, and there's so many barriers, you know, for families.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, in a society, that's all we do is, you know, talk about and try and control behavior. So it's only natural to try and control your parents' behavior when it's not what you want it to be.
And that it's somewhat embarrassing or humiliating. I could never take her into a restaurant like this. Oh my gosh, Dad, you have not shaved for how long? When's the last time you cleaned your teeth?
Right?
And this is really hard for children to say to their parents. And again, even if you're 62 years old and you have to say this to Mom,
Yes.
she's still Mom.
Right.
How about medications? You think adult children should kind of check out if Mom and Dad are following their proper medication regimen?
Oh, absolutely, Kathy. And again, one of the things that, you know, we see is they're toxic from the medicine because they can't remember if they took it in the morning. So I'm going to take it again. You know what? And I don't think I took my pill at dinner time. I better take it again at bedtime, and before you know it, they're toxic. Or they're not taking it at all. And now the blood sugars are through the roof, or they're passing out because their blood sugar is too long because they're not controlling it.
Or they get vascular dementia.
They get the vascular dementia from just not taking care of themselves. Medicines can be magic or a menace.
Absolutely.
I think we have to remember that they're synthetic, they're chemicals, they're making them in a petri dish over here in Schaumburg.
Yep.
But we need to understand that they can be very therapeutic and beneficial as well.
Yes.
I can tell the difference if I don't take my blood pressure medicine for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then I can say, well, no wonder it's 172/84, and no wonder you have that headache. When's the last time you remember to take your medicine?
Wow.
So I think it's one of the biggest responsibilities besides nutrition that families need to understand medication, and that it can be very, very potent and very powerful.
Trish, the show's going very fast. I wish we had an hour here. How do you go about considering a memory care community?
I think families and residents, it's a big business, and you're buying somebody's business, but you're in control and you have the power. And I think that as a consumer, consumers need to know that, but you need to be very selective. Currently, I help support 4 memory care communities and 9 assisted living.
Wow.
But I can go in one building, and truthfully, I will tell you, it's a feeling. You will walk in and you get the feeling people are friendly. There's not dead flowers at the desk. There's not garbage out in front. The staff is friendly. They're saying hello. You don't have to have a chandelier in the foyer. You don't have to have marble floors. You don't have to have, the fancy things, because a lot of our parents didn't grow up with that. We didn't grow up with that. But I think it's important that it's a feeling. I think, too, that visit without making an appointment. Drop in. Here, I'm looking for a place for my mother. Can you show me around?
Wow.
And, they should not expect you. I think it's always, it's a courtesy. They'd like to know that you were coming. They'd like to have hot coffee, and they'd like to have cookies for you if they know that you're going to visit.
Sure.
But on the other hand, you don't want to give them warning, okay, we're having company today. Make sure that the garbage is taken out. Make sure that all the staff, their hair is combed and their name tags are on. You should go and you should surprise.
The cookies and coffee can wait until the next visit.
Exactly. And I really see it as the consumer really needs to be in control and listen to your head and your heart.
Okay, so you have to be brave to do this. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Trish, I haven't heard too many people say that. I think that is a fantastic recommendation.
Yep.
Right. And again, you're spending somebody's life savings. This is a big deal. It's a lot of money.
Yes.
And you need to be very selective, and you need to be very comfortable when you do make that decision. And I think, again, go do a cold call, and how'd the visit go for you?
Very good. Trish, can you share your contact information with our audience?
Well, sure. My last name is Uttich. My cell phone is 224-315-6243. My email address is P as in Pat, UTTICH@brookdale.com. My mother-in-law had 10 children, never named one of them with the letter P. And so when she met me, I became Trish, so my initials weren't PU. But my email does start with PU.
Very good. And can we have the website for Brookdale?
Yes, BrookdaleSeniorLiving.com.